The ninja are known for many things, but one of the things that they are known most for is their elemental powers. It is a staple of Ninjago itself, and is something that we see in every single season and every single episode of the show. And it definitely does feel like their abilities vary from season to season. There are seasons where their powers feel a lot more strong, but there are other seasons where they feel a lot weaker in comparison. It really does just depend on the era of the show, but regardless, they are always still around. But there have always been some very interesting inconsistencies when it does come to those powers. And that being the case of the ninja utilizing powers that don't exactly fall under what their abilities are. There are some very infamous cases throughout the course of the show, but it does feel like in recent time we have had some more clarification on what it truly means, and the possibility that all of the ninja are open to having multiple elemental powers if they are secondary subsections of their main ability. And that is going to be what we discuss today. We are going to look through the known secondary elements that the ninja do seem to have, and then theorize on what the ones that we don't know could have. I do think it's fairly interesting, and there are some similarities between all of the ninja, but it definitely does seem to be the case that there is some sort of secondary element behind all of the main elemental powers. So let me not waste any more of your time, and let me show you my findings, as I believe they do have it, and I do think it's fairly compelling. We are going to start with the most known cases of secondary elements within the ninja, and then we'll go through to the least known, because that's where the most speculation will have to happen. The most known case of a secondary elemental power is actually going to be Nya. In season 11, or more specifically the ice chapter, we get an entire arc about Nya controlling ice. We get to hear about how there is something that is within her own scope, because ice is merely a different form of water. But it does still fall under a secondary element, because by all accounts what she is controlling is ice. Nya and the next ninja we're going to talk about is honestly the reason why I wanted to make this video, because this is the most hard-struck evidence we have that there is secondary elements within Ninjago. It is definitively the case that she has some level of control and some level of manipulation when it does come to the powers of ice. It doesn't mean that she's able to fully manipulate the ability, and for all of the ninja this is most definitely the case, but it definitely does show that there is some form of will if the energy is strong enough. I honestly really do like this. It still makes powers unique, but it does show that there is overlap within the powers of creation. Honestly, it's just a fun concept, and I do hope they explore it a whole lot more. But like I said, Nya's is by far the most definitive case. There is no way around the fact that she has controlled ice when it does come to season 11. The fact that she hasn't used it since then is a whole nother issue, but regardless of it, it does show that there is something there. But Nya's is the first instance of the secondary element. The second ninja we are going to talk about today is going to be Cole. Cole is a fairly interesting case for me, because it does seem to be that Cole has always had a secondary element, but it never really came to my attention until season 4 part 1. And this is his secondary element actually being lava. You may wonder why this is the case, but I do think there is genuine backing for it. Lava hasn't been directly introduced in terms of an elemental power, but there does seem to be reason that it is some form of subsection of either fire or heat. There are existence of lava tides, for example, within Ninjago, but that is not my argument I want to present. There are two instances of Ninjago, one from the classic era and one from season 4 like I said, where he does seem to actually use lava. The first one is coming from season 7. When Cole is fighting the Vermilion, we actually get to see him try to use his glowing RX arms. And also, side reference, Misako refers to these arms at some point as lava arms, so I rest my case. But anyways, we get to see Cole try to use his arms, and when he does it, he flies way past the Vermilion and accidentally slices a lamppost in half, and you can quite literally see lava generated when he does it. He also quite literally melts metal when it does come to this moment. This is not something that earth powers do by any account. It is completely not in the realm of what Cole is meant to do if he just has earth. The second instance is where the ninja are trying to get into Imperium and keep the elemental monsters out. We see Cole grab the big circular dome of the Imperium wall and lift it up, and you get to see a quite literal melting lava effect generate from Cole's elemental power. You see the red, you hear the sizzle, you hear Cole outright acknowledge the fact that he did do it. He is welding the wall together with lava in this moment. This is again fairly clean cut in my opinion. There is no way around it, and there's no way that earth power would be able to do that. So it does seem to be that Cole's secondary element is lava. It does make sense to link lava back to Earth just generally speaking, so I actually do like this idea that he does have some form of lava ability. It does call into question why he doesn't use it more often, but that is just me. But it does seem to be that Cole does have some level of manipulation when it does come to lava. I really like this and I do hope they expand on it, and honestly feels like the second most compelling case of a secondary element to me. So that is Cole's one. This brings us on to the third ninja and the last of the ones that feel fairly cut and dry, and that is going to be Jay. He is the most infamous one of the bunch because it is one of the most known scenes when it does come to Ninjago, or more specifically elemental powers, and it's the scene where Jay actually utilizes wind. There has been many debates as to what is going on when it does come to Jay in this moment. I myself have speculated many times when it does come to Jay's wind-like abilities. I have had many different explanations over the course of the years. But if you take into account the concept of secondary elemental powers, you realize that wind could be Jay's one for lightning. For one, this is the only time we actually see Jay use a different elemental ability. It is the only time we see something that isn't lightning come from Jay. Secondly, he verbatim says he's using wind. A lot of people have wondered if this is just simply him not realizing what he is doing, and of course we've had explanations out of universe from the writers, but regardless of that, we need to take into consideration that Jay says wind in universe. It does seem to be that he is utilizing it, and it does seem to act like wind accordingly. And it does make sense considering that there are similarities between lightning and wind. They are within the same general subsection when it does come to elemental abilities. So I do like this idea that wind could be a secondary element to lightning. It would make sense, and I do hope Jay gets to use it again one day. Of course it probably wouldn't happen, but I can always dream when it does come down to it. But I do think it is a comfortable argument to suggest that that is the secondary element for the lightning ninja. But with those three done, we are officially into unknown territory. We are officially into instances where the ninja haven't had a definitive instance of utilizing a different elemental ability. But this does bring us into the fourth ninja in question, and that is going to be Lloyd's, because even though we don't see it, we do have a fairly decent idea. This is a theory that I've had in the past as well. I believe Lloyd's secondary elements are essentially life versions of the core 4 elemental powers, being lightning, ice, fire, and earth. I believe that all of them can be utilized by Lloyd in some sort of fashion, as we have seen it happen in the past. We have seen instances of Lloyd utilizing green lightning, we've also seen Moro utilize it through Lloyd, and we've also seen instances of Lloyd utilizing green fire. It makes sense to believe that those elemental abilities are the subsection when it does come to life. Of course, we haven't seen any sort of life variants of earth or ice definitively used, but I do think it's fairly safe to assume that if we've seen fire and lightning, we can also guess that the other two are present. I do think this is also the perfect way of just really hammering home the concept of the ninja being connected, the unity, the teamwork of them. If Lloyd is able to have secondary abilities that are emulations of the ninja's abilities, I do think it would be a really cool way to really have that emphasis put on them. I just like this concept, and I do think it's the most fitting case when it does come to Lloyd's second elemental abilities. You could also argue golden power, but I feel like golden power would be over life, but that's just me. I don't know. They also feel like the same power as well, so I hope you're not going to flame me in the comments for that. But that is my depiction of Lloyd's elemental power. But this brings us into the last two ninja, and the most difficult ones when it does come to this video. The fifth one I will talk about though is going to be Zane. I do think Zane's ice ability subsection would just simply be water. There has been no definitive instance of Zane utilizing water, but if ice can be controlled by water, it would make sense that water could be controlled by ice. If Zane is able to manipulate a different state of ice like Nia, it would just simply work and would definitely have a very good mirrored reflection. I like this idea that Zane would be able to draw water from the ocean and then freeze it over. Again, we haven't seen it, but it would just simply be cool. There is no other real way of really linking ice to any other elemental ability though, so I do think this is a fun one nonetheless. Which means last up is actually going to be Kai. He was definitely the most difficult to place when it did come to this video, as Kai has only ever utilized the powers of fire. It's honestly a shame because there's just nothing really to go off of, until I thought of one scene in particular from Dragon's Rising. In Season 2 Part 1, where Kai has his initial confrontation with Cinder, we get to see Kai basically beat Cinder in a fight, and how Kai does it is sneak up behind Cinder, seemingly for no particular reason or method, method, there has never really been an explanation on what he was able to do. You could always argue that he followed along when it does come to Cinder Smoke, but that just doesn't really fit in my own mind. But then I realized it would be the perfect way for Kai to get behind if his secondary element was also smoke. As Kai has once said himself, when there's smoke, there is always going to be fire. They are the perfect link, and they are both separate elements that do perfectly coincide with each other. If Kai is able to generate smoke, it would make sense that he'd be able to do it through his abilities of fire. So I do think Kai is actually capable of doing it, whether he realizes it or not. Again, this would be cool to actually see him doing more in the future, but we've never seen it actually be the case. But it's the only element I've actually been able to link Kai back to. It's the only thing that we've actually seen him vaguely interact with. And again, I don't believe Cinder would just allow Kai to flank him like that. So it does make sense that this would be Kai's. It would be the perfect way to utilize it, but again, unfortunately, we've never seen it once more. But that seems to be Kai's secondary element, and I do like for that to be the case. And I'm definitely curious to know if you guys would agree with that one in particular. But that is my interpretation on what secondary elemental powers that the ninja may possess. There are many other ninja and other characters that I could talk about in terms of secondary powers, but I do think it was easier just to home in on the core 6. But I would like to know, do you agree with my interpretation? Do you think there are other elemental powers that they may be linked back to? Do you think they just don't have elemental abilities as a secondary ability at all? I would love to know your thoughts on it because I do think it's interesting. But with the instances in particular of J, Cole, and Nia, I really do think there's something there, and I would love to know what you guys think when it does come to this theory. But besides all of that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoyed. And if you did enjoy watching, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people. And if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each of you, your support means the absolute world to me, and I truly cannot thank you enough. But like I said, that is about it for today, and take care. Okay,